both of your companies are looking to redesign the way that businesses and universities recruit through new technologies such as AI. So why don't I just give you both an opportunity to just enlighten the audience here about what it is specifically your companies do, and then we'll take it on. So Applyboard first. Massi.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. So, Massi Basiri, I'm the Chief Operating Officer as well as co-founder of Applyboard. To give you guys a bit of a context as what Applyboard does, Applyboard is essentially a common application, a platform that enables international students who hope to seek their education in UK, Australia, USA, or Canada. This year alone, we've helped and assisted over 200,000 students to pursue that dream of studying abroad. I'll leave it there. Sultan?
So education is a right, not a privilege, is what you're saying?
Resounding. So our mission is all about making education accessible, because we do recognize that there is really no single platform that, as a student, and I was an international student myself back 12 years ago in Canada. So it was a tough journey. There is really no single place where you can go and see what your options are. Or even once you recognize what those options are, the process and going through that journey on its own is a challenge. So we are really there to make those options and make them transparent and make them accessible for students.
Sultan.
First off, thank you for having us here. I'm Sultan Saidov. I am president and co-founder of Beamery. And there's a little bit of similarity here. We're on a mission to create equal access to work, to enable companies to hire talent and place their employees into roles through internal mobility in a way that focuses on skills and capabilities. And we provide software to many of the world's biggest companies, a lot of the Fortune 50, the Fortune 500, to change the paradigm of how they approach recruiting and internal mobility to be something that can be proactive, so that you're not waiting for people to apply for jobs. You're not looking at traditional mechanisms such as where somebody went to school or where they were born. And you're really looking at skills and potential as the primary driver of how you think about where to place people.
And these are both AI-based technologies, correct? Just explain how that works. Massi.
So it's best I can explain it is, imagine a Google map. There are so many options from point A to B, right? And to get from point A to B, you gotta, in most cases, have certain logistics or certain requirements along the journey. So how we leverage that is now in a higher education, in studying abroad, that gets much more complex, because let's say, for example, a student wanting to study in Canada from UAE will probably need to present very different sets of requirements than a student wanting to study in, let's say, UK. So what we have built is we have essentially built a platform which enables us to house over 1,200 institutions, and really enables us to build those content. So from a student standpoint, they don't need to know. And as a student, essentially gives us some of their information. So we call it a student backpack. As a student provides us with some of their background information, we leverage AI and we leverage certain matching to find the most essentially eligible or recommended avenue for them. Through our platform, as students who go through that journey, they have 95% of chances of getting accepted to their choice. So versus in today's world, if you go and directly apply to a school, there is probably only 50% chance that you actually applied correctly, or you were well aware of what you needed to provide. But we take all of that away, and that doesn't end there. From there now, once assuming you've obtained a letter of acceptance letter from an institution, you still have to go through the government visa processes. And there we also have leveraged AI so that we can, from the get-go, take the visa probability of the students based on their conditions into account. So from the get-go, we can tell them where their likelihood are. I'll give you an example. Let's say a student coming from Africa probably has a much higher chances of going and getting to UK as opposed to Canada. So, but being upfront and giving that visibility to the students so they don't end up wasting or essentially wasting whether money or time to pursue maybe an education that that doesn't necessarily have the outcome that they're wishing for.
Thank you. I'm just fascinated. How does the use of AI take the world of that you work in, the sector that you work in, and bounce it into the next generation? You know, what's been the success of this AI-driven environment for you?
I think the biggest opportunities in the world of HR, recruiting, those types of experiences is to use AI to bring them to the level of personalization that we're now used to in consumer experiences. As consumers, we're now used to having everything personalized to us. If we watch Netflix, it's a feed relevant to us. A lot of other industries, and HR and recruiting in particular, still operate just like websites. There's no guidance around, for example, your career. If you earlier you were talking about kids looking at STEM and education and access to work, but the world of work is no longer careers. There's been a Cambrian explosion of jobs. So many people are now in jobs for no more than 1 or 2 years. And the question of how do I zigzag my career, how do I think about the paths I might take, is actually really hard to answer without the help of AI, because there's no precedent. And AI can give us answers such as, if I work in a role like support, is it possible or likely for me to move into an area like marketing or product? AI can infer skills and matches and things like that. And it becomes the nearest thing to something like Google Maps for navigating careers in a way that without AI and without that data inference would be very hard to do.
Before we talk about how governments, and I think getting a perspective from both of you will be really useful here, how governments can accelerate this borderless remote education and talent recruitment. And this is important for the policymakers here. We've all been having this conversation about what will the workplace look like going forward. You know, we're having that internally at Warner Media, the organization that I work for. I'm sure you guys are having the same conversations. There's probably not a person in this room who hasn't wondered about what the future of the workplace looks like. This is your business, so tell us, what are your thoughts?
I think a big part of it is not all work is going to be just a question of full-time jobs. I think a lot of companies, a lot of our customers are starting to explore concepts like gigs, like giving people opportunities whilst they're in a full-time job to do a side job as a group of people, to work on a project. And in some cases, it's also an acceleration into people doing part-time work as a career. I think that the acceleration of that, with work not having to be in an office, with jobs fundamentally being able to operate cross-border, is also allowing people to get hired not based on the fact that they went to a top university or that they know somebody, but really based on what experience they've already had, the fact that they've done certain projects, the fact that they've proved themselves. And that's massively opening up the equality of opportunity available to people in the types of jobs that are available to them.
The borderless opportunity is one that is front and center as a growth pillar here. The adoption of talent, the opportunity to afford and offer people, the opportunity to work here going forward is, will be very important. And then the retention of talent is obviously extremely important. So let's talk about what you guys have learned through the businesses that you run, how governments can facilitate this borderless transition, as it were.
Look, I think we have proven a strategy in some countries such as UK and Canada. From my perspective, there are really 3 steps that starts with labor. What is the labor shortage? The second becomes, okay, let's identify schools or partner with institutions that can provide that skills. The third becomes important, and I think it is a major step that often forgotten, but that is proven a strategy to work in UK, Canada, and Australia for decades, which is stability. I think as a student or someone who pursue to go abroad or live or work, stability in being in a position where they can build and live and thrive in that country is important. When we look at, for example, Australia being one of the first countries that has been doing that for over 40 years, then UK, and then when we look at Canada, where it's probably the latest into the game, has proven to be the best strategy. And there are a couple actually benefits for the country too. such as when you bring an international student to study in the country, first of all, they're paying. So that's an economy benefit for the origin source. So we take Canada as an example. The fourth export of the country is education. So that's a high amount of economy that they drive. Or to put it into another perspective, for each 2.5 international students studying in a country, one job gets created directly. So you put that into perspective. The second factor becomes where now a student comes there and they are given the chance at a younger age to adapt to a culture much quicker. Versus when you look at a newcomer who comes straight to work in a country, there tends to be a lot of actually funds and expenses for the government to get them ramped up to the culture, to the language, and so on. Versus when you bring them to study there, you naturally are, one, making money, and two, you're making them to adapt to that culture. The third is now they've studied your own education system, which if you can align it with your labor shortage, that's then top to the roof. And then they're aware with your culture, and now they're far more likely to get to the labor force immediately and be able to immediately produce, right?
What's your perspective?
I think one of the biggest opportunities for governments is to actually connect the methodology of how skills are treated within the education system with how companies actually then think about skills within the world of careers. It's a very recent phenomenon that the majority of jobs aren't tied to how education works. Not long ago, we used to be lawyers, doctors, and those types of educations actually set us up for careers. Now we live in a world where people are entering into a ton of new jobs that hadn't existed until very recently. And increasingly, companies are starting to think about the methodology of certain skill sets that you can validate to hire for those jobs. But the education system hasn't yet caught up. And governments, actually such as Australia, have started pioneering skills passports and certificates. It's a huge opportunity to actually shape the landscape of how we allow people to not only be more employable, but be more educated in what education we pick, how we actually think about what paths it opens up for us. And I think the opportunity for governments to embed that not only within the education system, but with the partnerships with companies and places where people can start their first jobs is very much
Does
there.
the exception prove the rule at this point? I mean, you've both name-checked, for example, Australia. Is that the problem, that there isn't enough of this being replicated around the world? What do you want to see put in place?
I think that is part of the problem, that there aren't enough governments that have really taken a data-centric approach to this. And it's starting to be on the agenda. There's been several cross-government forums that have started talking about the opportunity to create a skills passport and a skills identity, and there's been no standardization. I think one of the problems is that even if different governments started doing this independently, if everybody comes up with their own methodology for what skills are, it's going to be difficult to work in a borderless world with different education systems and universities. So this is really a cross-government opportunity to create alignment on standards that can work for different education programs to agree on a central system of what are skills and what are people going to be kind of digitally certified towards.
That's a really good point. We've got 5 minutes left. And I know that you are both co-founders. And so you have a good story to tell. And as we close this out, I think that we've learned an awful lot this afternoon across these 4 sessions. So I think if you don't mind, just going to get you guys to finally tell us your own story. Because in and of yourselves, your success has been extraordinary. What was the light bulb moment for you? What was it that made you think the world really needs this service? I'm going to get out there and do it. And how difficult was it? I mean, I think you talked about being a student yourself 12 years ago in Canada, but just take us through. I mean, I'll give you 2 minutes to do it each.
Sure thing. It's actually fascinating. So me and my brother, we were from Iran. So naturally, there are a lot of opportunities that may be limited to you. We decided to pursue our education in Canada for undergrad. Ironically, we went to experts and many experts shut us down on a spot because it was so uncommon for an undergrad student from Iran to go to Canada. It was never heard of. So we took up on that journey up in our own hand. Of course, we were privileged and lucky because we had certain family members in Canada already who could at least give us some more guidance. The process alone, it was close to almost a year, close to 14 to 16 months from the moment we started thinking about it to the moment we made it to Canada eventually. So the biggest part of the journey and the biggest learning curve for us, and what got us really to come together and build the platform we built, was that there is lack of transparency, lack of visibility. Well, the intentions are good, but those avenues are not well defined. And we're all limited to essentially what other experts know. So basic analogy I can give you about what we did with the industry is what Expedia did with travel agencies close to 15, 20 years ago. When you, as a consumer or a customer, you would have gone to a travel agency, you were very much limited by what they had. So 4, 5, 6 options. But then Expedia came and essentially enabled the consumer to come to a single platform, or enabled the travel agencies to come to single platform, have access to all the avenues. And now, again, we have to think, whether it's from a labor standpoint or an education standpoint, we sometimes tend to forget that the end consumer is the student. We have to look at it as a business. We have to look at it as a customer, in my opinion, at the end of the day. And I think both education and immigration are hugely lacking that sense of customer lens.
Yeah. Has it been fun?
It's been, as I say, it's been an uphill roller coaster. Would I do it again? Resounding.
Yeah, good. Go on.
So some similarities here is I started the business also with my brother. We both two brother business stories, and we're also first generation immigrants to the UK. Our family are from a small village of a few hundred people, and they gave us an opportunity by bringing us to the UK to have access to people and education and networks that they never had. And I think that element of being cognizant of, in some ways, winning the passport lottery and the opportunities that come with it was very much front of mind for us as we were starting our careers. And the trigger for starting Beamery came off the back of the fact that both my brother and I, we started our first jobs in finance just after the Great Recession. I started working in Goldman Sachs, and just at that time, because of the fact that the financial industry was in upheaval, tons of people suddenly ended up without jobs. There was a lot of people who even had job offers and suddenly they were rescinded. And I was seeing some of the brightest, most ambitious people I knew end up unemployed. And it seemed crazy to me that there actually wasn't any easy way for them to find a job elsewhere. Because a lot of people who start careers in finance, if you miss that sort of treadmill of starting your job, there isn't an opportunity for you until potentially a few years from then. And so the initial question was, how is it that all of these companies aren't aware of people out there who could be perfect for them? And why is it that the only way that you can find a job is by applying to it? And the thought emerged that we could reverse this process. We could actually create a system through which it's possible to be found for jobs. It's possible to match people with opportunities based on skills, even if you haven't heard of a company, even if you haven't heard of those jobs. And that was the genesis for us creating this new paradigm of software that enabled that. And it has been very fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
And of course, it's been tough. I mean, we've had various existential moments over the years. And I think as time goes on, with government support for startups and programs emerging, it's starting to be easier to have support networks. I think when we started, that was more nascent. Nowadays, I think governments have had a huge role to play in creating the sort of support networks and infrastructure that makes the fun parts more fun and the hard parts a little bit easier.
And with that, we're going to leave it there. We thank you very much indeed for joining us. And I hope for those of you who've had an opportunity to join us throughout this session, you've got something out of it. I certainly have. I started off by saying I've got a 2-year-old. I'm wondering what that alpha generation, what the world will look like as she grows up. All of this has been absolutely enlightening. So as we close it out, I'd like you guys to give a round of applause for our guests on the stage. And we thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.